Welcome everyone. Welcome everyone. Welcome everyone to another Ref Brandon and the Todd family YouTube video. Wherever you are, whatever you may be doing, thank you so much for making Ref Brandon and the Todd family part of your day. We always greatly appreciate it. It is a Wednesday, so of course that means it's time for another weekly top 10 countdown. And a couple of weeks back, I did a top 10 countdown. I forget, honestly, really, truly, what the exact category was, but it was about college football fans. And I had said in that video that there was some new listings out that had been released from different fan bases, and it was most loyal fans, the most toxic fans, the most dedicated fans, the most annoying fans, all that kind of good stuff. And I forget which one I did last time, but this week it is college football's most annoying fans. Now, the article came out June 28th, which was one day before the birthday of the greatest man on earth, but it was written by James Parks from SI.com. But I found a link to the article on College Football Nation since it is about college football, so I'm sure you could probably type up James Parks SI.com or collegefootballnation.com and find the article. But according to James Parks, this is the 10 most annoying fans in college football. Number 10, Penn State, 4%. Number 9, USC, 4%. Number 8, Florida State at 4%. Number 7, Miami. Obviously, it's Miami of Florida at 5%. And number 6 is Florida at 5%. So you can already tell with numbers 10 through 6, Penn State, USC, Florida State, Miami of Florida, and Florida, that this top 10 list is honestly, really, truly just the blue bloods of college football. And of course, they're going to be annoying because unless you're a fan of the team, you get annoyed with everybody else talking about them. And that's one of the reasons why I've always hated Georgia my entire life is I get sick and tired of hearing everybody else talk about them all the time. First of all, I don't know how grown men can walk around and bark like dogs. That's never going to make sense to me, no matter how hard you try and how much effort you put into it. You're never going to convince me that a grown man walking around barking like a dog doesn't sound like a complete buffoon. That's my opinion. That's never going to change. But outside of that, I just get so sick and tired of hearing people talk about Georgia all the time. So I can understand any of these teams being on the list because unless you're a fan of that team, especially if you live in the area, like if you live in the state of Florida, if you're not a Florida fan, you're going to get sick of hearing everybody else in that state talk about Florida. If you live in Pennsylvania and you're not a Penn State fan, you're going to get sick of everybody else in that state talking about Penn State. As big as California is, if you live in California and you're not a USC fan, you're going to get sick and tired of hearing everybody talk about USC. But the reason why these teams are on the list is because they're all blue bloods. So when it comes to college football, you get sick of hearing these teams talked about all the time. You can be watching College Game Day and they'll be talking about the Big 12 and they'll bring up USC and it's like, what does USC have to do with the Big 12? They don't. It's just they try to find ways to talk about the teams that people care about, which is good, but you can oversaturate people with certain topics and certain teams. and that's what happens. And the Georgia Bulldog program was number 11 on the list, so they just missed the top 10. But a couple of years ago, before they won their 2 national championships, they would have been on the list. Because before they won those 2 national championships, they hadn't won diddly squat in 40 years. But yet, every single Georgia fan made like their poop didn't stink. And it's like, why are you so arrogant? Your team hasn't won a doggone thing, and you acting like your poop don't stink. But now that they're winning, now they have a reason to be arrogant and cocky and conceited. But 5 or 6 years ago, they didn't. And they walked around like they was better than everybody and hadn't won anything. But now they've actually won something, so they have a reason to act like that. You still shouldn't, but at least you have a reason to act that way. Number 5, Texas at 7%. Number 4, Notre Dame at 8%. Number 3, Michigan, 9%. Number 2, Ohio State, 14%. And number 1, obviously, of course, Alabama at 22%. And there are several reasons why Alabama is number 1 and probably forever will be. You see they've got an 8% lead on Ohio State, who is number 2. But Alabama, first of all, they just have the plainest, ugliest uniforms in America. I know a lot of folks say Penn State does, and Penn State's uniforms are rather ugly and rather bland, but I just happen to like the color white better than the color red. I think the whole color red, I don't care what color red it is, what shade it is, if it's red, it's ugly. I just think the color red is a ugly, hideous color. But Alabama and Penn State both do have some pretty bland, normal, plain uniforms. But the main reason everybody hates Alabama is because they claim they've won 975 national championships. But honestly, really, truly, you can't prove them wrong, because until we got the bowl system in place back in the day, in the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s, teams were voted the national champion. There was one year way back in the day, I think it was sometime in the 60s, where there was 5 different newspaper companies that put out who they thought the national champion was. So you had 5 different teams that year that could have claimed a national championship. But in reality, nobody won it because there wasn't a bowl game that decided the national champion. There wasn't a playoff system. There was nothing. They just played the regular season, and then people voted on who they thought the best team was. And whoever got the most votes was declared the national champion. And there were some years that Bama had 3 or 4 losses. And of course, back in those days, you only played 7 or 8 games. But there were some years that Bama had 3 or 4 losses, and they still got declared the national champion. So they claim to have, I think, 27 national championships, which they do not have that many. But you can't prove them wrong, because there was no game that was proven that they weren't national champions. Now, if there had been a game that was played and Bama lost a game, you could say you're not the best team. Or had there been a game that was played and Bama didn't play in that game, you could say that. But when there's not a bowl game or a playoff to determine a national champion, if a team goes 0-9 and they get voted national champions, they're national champions. So that's why most people hate Alabama, because they claim all those national championships, which they don't have. But how can you prove differently? Because it was a voting process. So even though record-wise they weren't the national champion, if all you need is votes to say you're the best and you get voted to be the best, then I guess in your mind, you're the best. But that is the top 10 most annoying fan bases in college football from June 28th from SI.com, written by James Parks. Any thoughts on it? As always, please feel free to let me know. Let's go ahead and get our dad joke of the day in here. A huge stack of toilet rolls fell on me in the supermarket. I'm okay though, just soft tissue damage. And that does it for today's Ref Brandon and the Todd Family YouTube video. Until next time, it's Ref Brandon saying, just like in pro wrestling, life can be over by the count of 3. Tell your friends and family how much you love them. Bye.